So today we are making some rose, raspberry and lychee macarons. It's a take on the Espehan, but we're going to be making mini versions of these, so bite-sized macarons. Now today we are making them completely plant-based and dairy-free, and I'm going to go through all the steps now how to prepare your macaron shells. Now, when preparing plant-based macaron shells, they can be quite challenging, just like the traditional macarons. But I'm going to share with you some tips and tricks how you can get consistency every time with your vegan macarons. So the first thing, as always, you have to make sure that you mise en place everything. So prepare all of your ingredients before you get started. And I do advise to pick a nice dry day. You essentially want to have a day where it's below 50% humidity. When we work in a kitchen with a high humidity, we can run into some challenges when making plant-based macarons. So do keep that in mind. If it's a rainy day outside, probably not the best time to make your macarons. Now, another thing that I like to do ahead of time is dry out my almond meal. And I will include a video of how I've done that, but essentially all I did was put my almond meal on a baking tray with some paper, and we cook it at a low temperature just to take out any additional moisture. So essentially we're controlling more of the elements within the recipe so we can have more chance of success. I have a big bowl here. I'm going to be adding my confectioner's sugar along with that almond meal that I dried out earlier. I'm going to whisk those ingredients together just to ensure it's nicely dispersed. I'm going to place down a sheet of baking paper here, and I like to sift my almond meal and my confectioner's sugar, and this is going to ensure a nice smooth top to our macaron shells. For that coarser almond meal, you can use like a big metal spoon to pass it through your sieve. Let's give that a good mix again. I'm going to make these two different colors, so I want to divide this into two bowls. Okay, perfect. Now we can get moving on to making our French meringue. So we're using the French meringue method, also known as the cold meringue method. And to replace that egg white, we're using an ingredient called gerbet. Now this is a potato protein blend, which includes potato protein, some xanthan gum, and some plant fiber. So it's going to stabilize our foam and allow us to make a completely egg-free macaron. So I've already gone ahead and weighed out my gerbet. We're going to pop that into our bowl, and it is very important that we start off with a clean bowl. This one did come out of my dishwasher, so I know that there's no fat residue on it. If you're a little unsure, you can wipe your equipment down with a cloth with a little bit of vinegar and then just wipe that out. So gerbet has gone in. I'm going to add about 10% of my sugar, or about a spoon or two. And I'm going to whisk this by hand together just to disperse that powder. Now let's go in with our water. And again, I'm going to mix this by hand with our whisk. And I'm going to do this for about 30 seconds. I just want to start to dissolve that powder and ensure that none of it's getting stuck down the bottom. If you're working with really large quantities, you can use an immersion blender for this step. Let's scrape down the sides and underneath. Now onto our stand mixer, and we're going to mix this on the lowest speed for 2 minutes until that powder is completely hydrated. Hey Google, set timer for 2 minutes. Okay, it's been 2 minutes. Let's have a check. We just want to make sure that it's all dissolved. So let's scrape underneath down the bottom. Yep, it's looking good. Let's get it back on our mixer. And now we're going to add a third of our remaining caster sugar. On a medium speed, we're going to beat this until we reach the soft peak stage. So we only want to use the medium speed at this stage because we don't want to incorporate any large air bubbles. So we are at the soft peak stage. Let's take a look at our cold meringue, our French meringue. Oh, probably needs a little bit more, but it is very ribbon-like, so we're almost there. Okay, let's take a look now. Yeah, that's a bit better. So our peaks are just starting to flop over, so we're at that soft peak stage, which means we can slowly start adding our remaining sugar. Let's get this back on a medium speed. And let's add our remaining sugar 1 spoon at a time. I'm going to scrape this down a little bit. At this stage, you can increase the speed slightly. We just don't want to go full speed. And we're going to beat this until we get a nice stiff peak and our sugar is completely dissolved. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, I've got a beautiful thick meringue. Look at that. Nice stiff peaks. Now you want to make sure that that sugar is dissolved. You can just rub a little bit of it between your 2 fingers, and if that is nice and silky smooth, then it is dissolved, so you're ready to go. This one's fine, so we're going to carry on to the next step. Now I will be making 2 colors today, so I need to divide my meringue into 2. So I'm going to first just weigh it and then divide it up. I do find it easier to use the separate bowls as opposed to these taller bowls to mix. It's just a bit easier. Alrighty, now we can start adding our colors. Now because I'm doing a rose, raspberry and lychee, I thought it'd be nice to do a pink and then like a green for the lychee color. Okay, I think I'm happy with those 2 colors. So now we can start folding in our almond meal and confectioner's sugar. So I'm going to add half at a time. And at this stage, we're just folding everything through. We don't want to deflate that meringue. Once it's about half folded, we can add the remaining. Once everything's folded through, we can do what's called our macaronage. So depending on how thick your batter is, will be depending on how much macaronage we need to do. We essentially are trying to create the correct texture for our macaron batter. So to do that, we would need to swipe the batter along the long side of the bowl, just to start deflating it. And we're going to check the consistency. We need to be able to do a figure 8 without it breaking. So for me, I think it's still slightly thick. I'm going to deflate it a little more. You can also go side to side to deflate. Let's have a look at this batter now. I'm going to leave it at this. I actually prefer to have a little bit of a thicker batter than too thin. So I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to do my green now. For our piping bags, I'm going to put half of each color into an individual piping bag without a tip. And I'm doing the full recipe, so this is like the large quantity in your recipe. And when you're filling your piping bag, you want to try not to incorporate too much air. So when you get in the piping bag, see those air pockets? We're just going to flatten those out. Let's cover these with a bit of cling wrap so they don't get a skin on top. Now for our tip, I am using about a 5 to 6 millimeter round tip nozzle. I'm going to put that into our third piping bag. We're going to cut the ends of these other ones as well. Probably about 10 millimeters or around half an inch. And we want to place them right at the base of that tip. So I like to pull down that plastic. So we're ready to go. So I have myself a guide here that's going to help me pipe out my vegan macarons. You can make one of these at home as well. You can just use a piece of baking paper and one of these round tip nozzles and just turn it upside down with a marker and then draw out your stencil essentially. And you can reuse this. You just put your sheet of baking paper over the top, adhere it to your bench with a little bit of the batter. I'm actually going to put a little bit more batter just on the top just to help this stick my baking paper. So we just don't want that to move as we're piping. And with our macaron piping, we want to go in at a 90-degree angle with some pressure and a little bit above where our marking is, so hovering over, and we're going to press until we're almost at the end, and then stop, and then we're going to go around. Let's slide it onto our baking sheet. All right, let's quickly do the next one. Now we've got our macarons in our trays. We can give them a tap underneath, bring any of those large air bubbles to the surface. If you notice any air bubbles have come to the surface, you can use a toothpick and just pop those out. Give it a little wiggle. I have some rose petals that I thought would be cute to sprinkle over the top. I thought I might chop them up a little bit so they're a bit smaller. Sprinkle a little bit over the top. Okay, I'm going to set these aside to dry now and pipe out the rest. It is best to take out all of that batter and then refill it just so we don't have any big air pockets. So I'm going to dry these ones as well. Now you can just do this outside until they develop a nice skin on top, or I'm going to do this in my oven. I do have a low setting on there, so I'm going to dehydrate these essentially between 30 to 35 degrees Celsius for about 10 minutes or until they develop a nice skin on top. You can do this in a dehydrator as well to speed up the process. So I have been drying my macaron shells and the tops are nice and dry now. You do want to make sure that they are very dry. You shouldn't be able to squish them or anything like that. They should be very nice and dry to touch. There we go. I'm going to set my oven now to 135 degrees Celsius before we put these guys in to get their feet. So we've got our feet now. Maybe let's have a little bit of a zoom in. We can see them. See those beautiful feet. I've just opened the door a crack. We're just letting a bit of that steam out. And we are going to let these guys cool down for about 5 minutes. before we put our oven back on to 100 degrees. So our oven door is open just a crack, 5 minutes, and then we're going to continue baking. Okay, our 5 minutes is up. We are going to get our oven back on and we're going to set it to 100 degrees Celsius. And we're going to set it for 15 minutes. And if you have the option to open the vent, you can open the vent as well. And we want a low fan. Okay, let's continue baking. Okay, let's take a look, see if they are ready. Well, they certainly look great. Let's see if they're coming off the paper. Well, see, they're still sticking. They definitely need some more time. We're going to pop these in again for about 5 more minutes and then check. Okay, let's check. They're still sticking a bit. Let's do another 5 minutes. Let's take a look. Oh, so they're just sticking a little bit. Let's have a look at the tray down below, because I know that down here is usually a bit hotter. Yeah, see, these ones are coming off. Oh, that one's a little stuck. I think a couple more minutes and then I'll probably take this tray out. Let's go back in. So it's really going to be dependent on the day. If it has been a little bit humid, it could take a little bit longer to bake. Okay, I'm going to take that bottom tray out and get these guys in for a few more minutes. Okay, let's check. I think we tried that one before. Yeah, these ones are. So they're sticking see how this one's sticking just a tiny bit? That's fine, I'm going to take these off. Now I'm just taking my macarons off the tray and I'm just putting it onto a sheet, something that's going to fit into my freezer. And if you pop these into the freezer for about 30 minutes, it just makes them super easy to take off the sheets without damaging the shells at all. So I'm going to pop these into the freezer now, and then yeah, in about 30 minutes you can take them off. You can store them in a container and keep them frozen, or you can start putting your filling in. So we're making a lychee confit today, which can be used to put into many different types of desserts. I'm actually going to be putting this into a macaron today inside one of the creams to give it a beautiful flavor. Now, I understand that lychee is something that is a little bit tricky to get a hold of. In the commercial space, you can purchase this as a frozen product, but I find the easiest for at home is to go to your local Asian grocery store, whether that's in your town or online, and just purchase the lychees that you can get in the can. That's what I did. I just strained the water off, blended it, and just sieved the puree, just so we got a beautiful puree left over. And I used about 1 can of the lychees for this recipe. So it's very easy to prepare. First thing that we're going to do is add that puree that we just prepared into our saucepan, along with some lime juice. And we want to bring this up to 40 degrees Celsius or until it just starts getting warm. And we'll just do that over a medium heat. Now, while that's heating up, we have our sugar and our pectin. And as always, when using pectin, we want to mix it with the sugar. And this is going to help it prevent from clumping. Lychee has a wonderful flavor. It's slightly floral, and then it has kind of like a grape flavor, but it's very mild, sweet, fruity, tropical. It's so delicious. And we want to slowly bring this to a boil. Okay, it's just started simmering. We're going to allow this to simmer for about 20 seconds. And I'm going to pop it back into that same bowl that had the puree. So this is ready now. And as this cools, it's going to thicken into like a gel. Let's put some cling wrap to contact and transfer into the fridge for it to set. Once set, you can put it in a piping bag or add it to your favorite dessert. So today we're making a French buttercream, and this one is going to be in the flavor of rose and raspberry. So let's go through all the steps that we need. Everything is of course completely plant-based and dairy-free. This particular buttercream is not very sweet. It's still super silky smooth and stable enough for our macaron filling. So the first thing that we're going to do is whip up some vegan margarine. Now I'm using a firm variety of margarine or a high fat. Something that you would exchange butter for. And we want to make sure that it is nice and soft. You want to use it at room temperature, or you can soften up in your microwave just in 5-second intervals. So I'm going to whip this for about 5 minutes. We want to get it nice and fluffy and incorporate some air in there. Okay, so it's been going for 5 minutes. Let's sift in our confectioner's sugar. This is going to help stabilize our buttercream. So whilst this is not a traditional French buttercream, it has a very similar taste and texture. A traditional French buttercream would actually use raw eggs. These days they tend to use either pasteurized eggs or a pastry cream or some type of custard. And we're going to be doing something similar, but of course making it plant-based. So let's mix in our icing sugar, and we're going to beat this for a couple more minutes. Now to flavor our buttercream, we're using some rose water. And this is a very common ingredient here in Greece. I just buy it like in one of these bottles here. If you are using rose extract, the quantity is going to be far less. You only need a couple of drops. But for the rose water, I've left the measurement in your recipe. So we're going to add that. I'm going to whip this now. Incorporate that well. And to give this the raspberry flavor, I'm using some freeze-dried raspberry powder. If you can't find freeze-dried raspberry powder, you can buy just the whole freeze-dried raspberries. And I just used my spice grinder, that's why I've got it out, to blend it into a powder, and then I just sift out the seeds and just weigh out what you need. It also gives a lovely color too. At this stage, we are going to slowly start adding our pastry cream or the quick custard recipe that you'll find in your recipe. So I'm just going to add like a spoon at a time, and we're going to beat in between each addition. So now that's nicely whipped up, we can take off our beaters, and we're going to get out some of those larger air bubbles. So just going back and forth with our spatula. Now, if you're doing a very large batch of this, you can just do it in your stand mixer, just change it to the paddle attachment. And we just want to let it run for a couple of minutes on the lowest speed, just to get rid of some of those big air bubbles. Now let's get this into a piping bag. You can use any kind of tip that you like. If you want to use a fluted tip, I'm using a round tip nozzle today, just keeping it nice and classic. And just try not to add too many air pockets when you're popping it into your piping bag. And we're all ready to go with our rose and raspberry French buttercream. So we're all ready to fill our macaron shells. I've just taken the shells out of my freezer, and I like to put them in the freezer because it makes them much easier just to quickly take off the paper. So I'm just flipping them over. See how nice and easy they come off? Let's do it to the other sheets too. So we need to match them up. So I did do 2 trays that have some rose petals on top, so I'm going to have those as my tops and then these ones as my bottoms. So we're just going to match up ones that are the same size and then put them aside. Let's fill our shells now. We've already created our buttercream. So we're going to go in with our buttercream first. And then we have our lychee confit. I'm just going to cut the tip off the end. And we're going to pipe a little bit of this inside. And then pop the lid on. Beautiful. And you can carry on with the rest. So I managed to get all of our macarons onto one tray. We're going to cover them well with some cling wrap and then put them into the refrigerator to mature. Now you do want to mature your macarons for at least 12 hours or even longer if you can, and that's going to allow all of that flavor to infuse into the shell and give the perfect texture, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So let's wrap these up well. Beautiful. All right, into the fridge. And then tomorrow we can enjoy our beautiful macarons. I'll see you then. I really wanted a centerpiece for my dessert table or my dessert bar buffet. So that's got to be our macarons. And I'm doing a macaron tower today. I went to my local florist and she helped me put an arrangement together, which I think is going to look really nice. So this crown of roses is going to be the base. I purchased this macaron tower just off Amazon. I think it was about $15 or something. And that's going to sit on here like so. And then we're going to start building up all our macarons. Now I'm going to try and put it on this serving platter. And the piece de la resistance, of course, is our macaron tower. Isn't it absolutely gorgeous? And we have our macarons filled today with a rose, lychee and raspberry flavor. So it's very similar to an Espehan, but in a bite-sized form. So we hope you enjoyed this class and join me for the next one. And I will see you soon. Bye.